the world's oldest football club, a fourth-tier team in Nottingham with a few thousand fans and a crumbling stadium. And in the summer of 2009, a man with a gold-tipped cane walked through the door and told them he was going to make them the biggest club on the planet. What happened next is one of the most jaw-dropping stories in the history of sport. And there's one detail buried inside it that almost nobody talks about. Notts County are best known as the oldest professional football club in the world. And for most of their existence, that's all they had. No trophies to speak of, no famous players, no money. In 2009, they were perennial strugglers, heading into their sixth straight season in League Two, and they appeared to be unlikely targets for a takeover by Arabian billionaires looking to propel the club to the very top of English football. So when the news broke that a mysterious Middle Eastern consortium had bought the club and was promising to turn them into a Premier League powerhouse within 5 years, the whole football world stopped and stared. This video is about that takeover, how it happened, why it fooled everyone, and what was really going on behind the scenes, because the truth is so much stranger than the headline. Most people know the rough outline of this story, but what they don't know is the real reason Notts County was targeted in the first place. And once you find out, the whole thing looks completely different. We're going to get to that. But first, let's go back to where it all started. In June 2009, a sizable man dressed in black carrying a gold-tipped cane walked into Meadow Lane. His name was Russell King. He claimed to be a Jersey-based financier with connections to the Bahraini royal family, and he was the new owner of Notts County. He was going to propel County from League Two to the Premier League within 4 years. He had a plan, he had the money, and to prove it, he had already lined up one of the most recognizable names in world football to come and run the show. On July 22nd, Notts announced the appointment of former England manager Sven-Göran Eriksson as director of football, and what one Guardian journalist described as one of the game's most staggering moves of recent times. Think about that for a second. Sven-Göran Eriksson had managed England at 2 World Cups. He had managed Lazio, Manchester City, and some of the biggest clubs in Europe. And now he was the director of football at a League Two club with a stadium that needed a new roof. The football world genuinely did not know what to make of it. And Sven wasn't alone. So Campbell was handed a £33,000 per week ambassadorial contract in addition to his playing deal with the club. Sol Campbell, a former Arsenal and England centre-back making one appearance for a 4th division side. Rumors were flying around that David Beckham, Luis Figo, and other superstars of 2000s football were coming in on the back of the takeover. Players at the club at the time have described the atmosphere as completely surreal. One recalled sitting in a pub in Nottingham with Sven buying drinks, champagne bottles appearing on the table, and the whole thing feeling like a circus. And here's the thing, the fans loved it. Before the takeover, 60% of the club was owned by a supporters trust, a rare fan-based ownership that had originally saved the club from extinction. In the spirit of that generosity, the trust gifted its majority share to the new owners in return for promises of substantial investment over a 5-year plan. They handed over their club for basically nothing because they genuinely believed this was their moment. And who could be blamed? The story was perfect. Too perfect, as it turned out. King had flown the Notts County directors out to Bahrain for negotiations, where they met a man presented as a Bahraini prince, who was from Bahrain but certainly was not a prince. The plan presented to County was to be in the championship by 2012, the club's 150th anniversary, and to develop Meadow Lane into a 40,000-seater stadium with hotels and a conference center. King produced a bank guarantee of £5 million from First London Bank to ease any concerns, and the Supporters Trust, who had kept County debt-free, happily handed the club over for £1. They were excited. They thought they'd won the lottery. Now, remember that detail I mentioned at the start, the real reason Notts County was targeted? We're getting close. Keep watching because this is where the story goes from bizarre to genuinely unbelievable. By autumn 2009, things were already starting to unravel. The dream was falling apart by November. King's criminal past had been exposed by journalists, there was a winding order over unpaid taxes, and the club hadn't even paid the milkman's bill. The £5 million bank guarantee from First London turned out to be worthless. The bank itself went into administration. The guarantee had been unapproved by the bank's board and came from a part of the bank that no longer existed. King and his associate Willett both vanished, leaving the chief executive Peter Trembling to captain the sinking ship. Trembling spent months desperately scouring the world with Eriksson in search of huge sums of money needed to meet the financial obligations that Muntu had created, but found nothing. County were taken over by local businessman Ray Trow in February 2010, with the club's £7 million in debt. And they discovered that not only had Muntu not invested a penny, King had actually drained £200,000 from the club's own accounts. The final debts included a six-figure sum owed to a law firm and £250,000 owed to Sol Campbell for his solitary appearance. The situation would have been significantly worse had Eriksson not agreed to forego £2.5 million that the club owed him. So who was Russell King and what was he actually doing? This is the part of the story that most people don't know. And honestly, when you hear it, it reframes everything. King had founded a company called Swiss Commodity Holding, which claimed assets of $2 trillion and the rights to all the gold, iron ore, and coal in North Korea. Read that sentence again. $2 trillion. The rights to all of North Korea's mineral wealth. He was preparing a fraudulent stock market flotation of this company, and the takeover of Notts County, together with a similar attempted takeover of the BMW Sauber Formula One team, was intended to lend positive publicity to the company and drive interest in its flotation. So Notts County was never the end goal. It was a prop, a credibility prop. Owning a football club was part of the deception to prove to the North Koreans that he was the billionaire he claimed to be. King needed the North Korean government to believe he was a legitimate, powerful businessman before they would sign over the mineral rights. And having a famous English football club with Sven-Göran Eriksson as your director of football and Sol Campbell on your books made that story a lot more convincing. And then it gets even stranger. In November 2009, King persuaded Eriksson to accompany him to Pyongyang to negotiate the deal. And at a formal welcoming dinner, Eriksson found himself sitting next to the president of the North Korean Football Association, Sven-Göran Eriksson, director of football at a League Two club in Nottingham, sitting at a state dinner in North Korea. The story almost sounds made up. The Korean regime apparently did more background research on King than anyone at Notts had done, and discovering his whole billionaire persona was a house of cards, they threw both him and Eriksson out of the country. King then fled to Bahrain. Throughout the whole operation, King had been signing documents using the pseudonym L. Voldemort, after the Harry Potter character, and later claimed he couldn't have been involved because his real name never appeared on any paperwork. The man orchestrating a $1 trillion fraud was signing off as Lord Voldemort. That's the level of brazenness we're talking about. King was eventually extradited to Jersey in 2018, where he was charged with 25 counts of fraud and larceny, and sentenced to 6 years in prison in 2019. Astonishingly, he never faced any charges specifically related to his time at Notts. And what about the club? Despite the chaos, the strong squad that Eriksson assembled still won the league that season, a genuinely remarkable achievement given everything happening off-pitch. But the damage was done. The debts eventually caught up with them, and County tumbled out of the Football League by 2019 for the first time in their history. The oldest professional football club, bought for £1, used as a prop in a $1 trillion con involving North Korea, a fake Bahraini prince, and the man who signed his name as Lord Voldemort. And at the end of it, Sven-Göran Eriksson, one of the most decorated managers in the world, sitting at a state dinner in Pyongyang wondering how on earth he got there. Football has seen a lot of wild ownership stories, but nothing, before or since, has come close to this. If you've made it this far and you're as fascinated by this story as I am, drop a comment below. I want to know which part of this shocked you the most. Was it North Korea, the Voldemort emails, Sol Campbell's £250,000 bill? Let me know, because this community always has the best takes on stuff like this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, genuinely, this is the kind of story we cover all the time. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.